So we're going to do something a little bit different in the channel today. I know it's mostly been revolved around video games in the past. However, it's mainly been more an extension of my hobbies and what I've been interested in. Something for me to have more fun with what I'm already having fun doing. And lately, I've really been enjoying reading a lot. I've always been someone who's super hot or cold with any of my hobbies. I just jump from one hobby to the other. So I'm either only playing one type of video game, whether that's Football Manager, Valorant, League, Overwatch, and that extends to reading as well. I've read my entire life, but I've always read in bunches. It's either the only thing I'm doing or I'm not reading at all. And with this quarantine, not surprisingly to anyone, I'm sure, but with all my free time, I've had a ton of time to read, and I've just been reading everything in sight. So today I want to do something a little different. I want to do kind of a book review, give my thoughts on the Dresden Files, which if you don't know, it's this really cool series. It's kind of like it is a mystery series, but it happens in kind of this urban fantasy setting. The main character is a wizard detective. It doesn't get much more fun than that. And I just kind of want to touch on why I started reading it in the first place. In fantasy, if you're not familiar with the genre at all, which I'm sure you are, that's probably why you're watching this video, there's a lot of long books out there. So I just recently gotten back into reading. The first book I picked up was and this was like a week or two ago now. It was the second book in the First Law trilogy. I won't touch on it now. That's a different video. If you haven't checked out the series, do so. It's great. Like I said, I just finished the second one before they are hanged, and it was really good. But it's a heavier series. It's not crazy long. It was 550 pages, I think, but definitely dense. Not necessarily dense, but maybe just long. And I knew I didn't want to burn myself out before I got started, because I do, especially during quarantine, want to continue reading and keep doing that. And so I was kind of looking for a way to give myself a break, basically, because I think I burned through that book in like 2 days. But then I just immediately wanted to pick up another book was the problem. I think I finished it at 8 or 9 at night, and I wanted to start a book that night. So that kind of gives you perspective on how I read. Like I said, if it's what I'm doing, it's the only thing I'm doing. So I kind of looked around because I can't run out to Barnes & Noble because of the quarantine. Everything's closed. And I had a few books on hand that I had just picked up, months and months ago at this point. I've been reading through Malazan. I won't get into that too much because, once again, that's another video. But anyways, I'm about 100 pages into Reaper's Gale that I started, I think a month or two ago. So I looked at that and I was like, I know if I pick up Malazan, I'm gonna burn myself out, and I'm not gonna read more than that book basically in the next few weeks. So I was like, okay, that's probably not a good idea. I have the first book in Lightbringer. I think it's called Black Prism, but don't quote me on that, lying around. So I started reading that, and I was like, once again, that's the start of another long fantasy series. And I was like, not that I enjoy it. I love long fantasy series, don't get me wrong. I'm just trying not to burn myself out. As I kind of ease back into it, I'm maybe going to try and, rather than burn myself out in a month, maybe, let myself read, like a normal person for the next 5-6 months, maybe a year. So I was like, that might burn me out too. So I looked back at my bookshelf, and I had Stormfront lying around, which is obviously the first book in the Dresden Files. And like I said, it's about, a wizard detective in this really cool urban fantasy setting. And I was a little bit hesitant to start Dresden, despite some great reviews recently I've heard. But mystery, like my dad and wife read Sue Grafton, who's a great mystery author. It's never been my genre. So that kind of kept me away from it. I think I bought this copy in 2018 and I didn't start it. If that kind of puts it in perspective, how I've been, a little bit hesitant. But it was kind of just the perfect storm, because I looked at it and I was like, I can read this in a day or two. It's going to be it's going to be a fun read. You know, it's not long. It's just a fun book. And I knew it was going to be a fun book. So despite my kind of hesitations about the mystery genre as a whole, I was confident from what I've heard that Jim Butcher does such an excellent job blending fantasy and mystery and kind of combining the two genres together that, you know, I knew it was probably a pretty safe pick. And it was also, it's easier to jump into a book like that when it's, you know, only 300 pages and you can knock it out, you know, in not a few hours, but, you know, maybe a day or two. You're not committing to, you know, a 2-week read like a Malazan book or something like that, something longer. So I was pretty confident. It's like, okay, I might as well give it a shot, start it. Worst comes to worst, I don't finish it, or I finish it and, you know, I don't waste that much time on it. And it was everything I was hoping for. Like I said, it is totally what you expect. It's fun. It's gripping. You know, the mystery aspect is great. You want to keep reading. You want to find out what happens. You want to see how everything gets solved and how the dust settles at the end of it. So I couldn't be happier with it. I think unsurprisingly, definitely the icing on the cake in this book is the main character, Harry Dresden. He's not really like any other wizards I've read. I think it's very obvious. Jim Butcher was kind of going for, it's like, okay, we have all these other wizards and all these other stories that like have this very mystical sort of power, magic. You know they're magical, but it seems like they very rarely ever use it, or it's like very much not in your face. That's not the case in the Dresden Files, at least not in the first one. It's, you know, when he uses magic, it's very obvious, you know, it's very straightforward, and it's kind of what you expect. He's kind of just a badass wizard, which was so refreshing, and it just kind of lends itself to I'd recommend this book to anyone who's, you know, wants a break. Maybe it's like, maybe you should be taking a break from reading, but you're like, no, I want to keep reading, but you're kind of feeling yourself get burnt out. Just try Dresden Files. You'll probably find yourself like I did. I felt so refreshed. I finished that book and I was like, okay, I'm ready to take on the next thing. And it did its job perfectly. After I finished that one, I had Lies of Locke Lamora, which I've been wanting to read. It's been sitting on my shelf for months and months. And I know it was going to be, you know, from everything I heard, I was going to enjoy it so much. But I was just ready after the Dresden Files, after Stormfront. I was ready to pick that book up, you know, start a 700-page novel, because it just made me feel refreshed. And that has so much to do with his writing. It's, you know, encapsulating, it's gripping, you know, he keeps you entertained. Harry Dresden, you just want to find out more of how he ticks, how he works, how he thinks. So I couldn't be happier. Jim Butcher, he really just does a great job with all the characters in the book. There's Murphy, who is kind of like his inside contact with the police department. Very kind of typical. How many TV shows have you seen where it's like, okay, the main character you're following is a consultant too. He's like a consulting detective, so he has more liberty and freedom. And I didn't find that in Dresden Files. It never felt that way. Like, oh, this is something that's been done by a million, you know, detective shows or series or whatever. Just because the way he writes and how he writes his characters, it doesn't matter that that's kind of like a cliche in the whole mystery genre. You don't care about it. It's not, you know, anything unforgivable by any means. And the world he builds is just so, it's just fun. That's the word I just keep coming back to. It's what you want out of kind of a fun fantasy world. There are demons, there are vampires, there are wizards. There are wizards that use magic, and it's not this like mystified thing you never fully learn about. So that's the main takeaways. I wasn't expecting it to really be so straightforward, which if you're you're expecting some like deep, you know, fantasy read where you want to get out your pencil and paper and take a million notes about the 35 different characters that you're trying to follow, this isn't the series for you. But if you're just looking to, pick up a nice, light, fun read, I would highly recommend Stormfront.